A couple weeks ago, when I was filming my episode on Prime Minister Trudeau's comments on where he was threatening to lock down the country unless everyone gets boosters, there was another section of that interview that I found interesting about journalists and his perceived threats against them and what he may do about that. So I want to talk about that this week on Don't Talk TV. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So a couple weeks ago, I did a video of looking at an interview that Prime Minister Trudeau gave while he was in Winnipeg. Ironically, not wearing a mask in a hospital in Winnipeg. I thought we were supposed to still wear masks in hospitals, but be that as it may, we all know there's a different set of rules for the elite, like Prime Minister Trudeau, and other rules for the people. But what really caught my attention, actually, as I was looking through that video, trying to find the spot where he was talking about what was going to happen, about there being new restrictions if everyone isn't vaccinated, at the very beginning, I found this section really interesting where he's talking about these perceived threats against media. And of course, he stresses that these are people who are being threatened for telling the truth.
As I've been saying for a number of weeks now, the rise in hatred and violence and threats against journalists, particularly against women journalists, particularly against racialized journalists, is unacceptable.
And of course, he has to stress that he's particularly concerned if the threats are against women or racialized people, because if a journalist is a white man, I guess he doesn't deserve the same protection of the law. That seems to be the implication. But what I think is really important is this next segment where he talks about the pressure that his government is putting on police.
On top of that, a big piece of that letter was calling on police forces across the country to take more seriously the threats and the intimidation that is happening right now, and not simply look at them as individual acts, this person facing a threat of some horrific. And I can certainly tell you that when the Minister of Public Safety sits down with the Association of National Chiefs of Police this afternoon, he will be bringing forward an expectation that police forces across this country take seriously, very seriously, not just as individual issues, but as a systemic issue, this pattern of intimidation attacks on people who serve their country like journalists.
Now, I think this is highly problematic and people should be concerned because traditionally in Canada, the police have not been politicized. They've been separate from politicians. They do their own enforcement. They determine their own enforcement priorities and objectives. Obviously, the legislative body gives them the law that they are to enforce, but the police enforce it without direction from the politicians. What we see here now is clear direction from politicians telling the police how to enforce the law and who to enforce the law against. And I think it's very clear from Prime Minister Trudeau's comments when he's talking about truth and people being mean to reporters. What he's really talking about is his desire to criminalize dissent. And we've already seen this. I mean, the Freedom Convoy was the example par excellence of criminalizing dissent. If you go against the Liberal Party of Canada, you will be crushed and you'll have the full weight of law enforcement brought down upon you. And I would suggest that I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being completely fair in that. I mean, people say, well, they shut down downtown Ottawa for a couple of weeks. Well, it wasn't really shut down. You can see videos. You can see my own feeds. I just saw an article in the news this morning where the federal government is struggling to find business owners who can say that they were harmed in any way by having a bunch of new customers hanging out in downtown Ottawa. And furthermore, we've seen railway blockades, we've seen protests before. I mean, the summer of 2020, how many protests did we see there? Those didn't need the full weight of the state to be brought down upon them because they were not dissent. They were in keeping with what the Liberal Party of Canada presented. So this whole thing about telling police how to do their jobs is troubling, but so is this whole concept that we somehow need extra laws to protect journalists. And this narrative that journalists are being attacked for telling the truth. Frankly, I suspect people are getting angry, yes, but maybe they get angry because of headlines like this that the Toronto Star never recanted. I mean, they gave some wishy-washy, sorry, but I'm not actually sorry apology. I mean, they're calling for the death of unvaccinated people, and then, oh, we don't understand why people are upset. But you shouldn't be upset, peasant. You should just take the jab and shut up. But now they're trying to put that into law. And of course, Toronto Star, they're at it again. They're saying the laws need to be changed. There's been some rumblings that the laws might be changed. But do we need extra laws to protect reporters or leftist politicians? I would suggest not. I mean, let's look at the criminal code. What do we have in the criminal code already? So as usual, I've got the Justice Laws website open to the criminal code. We're going to have a look at section 264 of the criminal code. So 264 sub 1 is criminal harassment, and it states that no person shall, without lawful authority and knowing that another person is harassed or recklessly as to whether the other person is harassed, engage in conduct referred to in subsection 2 that causes the person reasonably in all the circumstances to fear for their safety or the safety of anyone known to them. And the conduct that's prohibited is following them from place to place, repeatedly communicating with them, directly or indirectly, besetting or watching their dwelling house, or engaging in threatening conduct directed at the other person or a member of their family. So this is a pretty broad law, gives a lot of protection for a lot of different behaviors. So again, if people are actually doing these things, if they're actually stalking reporters, hanging out outside their house, and doing so repeatedly, and causing them reasonable fear, and I stress reasonable fear, we've got a section of the criminal code for that already. We also have section 264.1 sub 1 that says everyone who commits an offense who, in any manner, knowingly utters, conveys, or causes any person to receive a threat to cause death or bodily harm, to burn, destroy, or damage real or personal property, or to kill, poison, or injure an animal or a bird that is the property of any person. And of course, we also have 265 of the criminal code that a person commits an assault when, without the consent of another person, applies force intentionally to that person directly or indirectly, or attempts or threatens by an act or gesture to apply force, or while openly wearing or carrying a weapon or an imitation, accosts or impedes another person or begs. The laws that we have there very clearly give broad protection to all members of Canadian society from harassment, being threatened, or being assaulted. There's no need for extra laws unless you want to make a certain class of people's privileged, and unless you want to specifically target certain viewpoints and criminalize dissent. That seems to be the recurring theme here. I think that's something that people should be very concerned about. People always ask me, what can we do about this? I mean, waiting until the law is passed and challenging it in court is one option, but that's a pretty long option. Regrettably, we have to wait until 2025 until there's another election. We essentially have a majority government, so we know the NDP is going to support anything the Liberals do. Although, as I say, as of right now, there isn't a law in the books. This is just talk, but it's always important to keep an eye on what are the attitudes, what kind of trial balloons are getting sent up by our government, and respond to those trial balloons. Let your Liberal Party of Canada MP know that you're not happy about this. I'm sure there's other more creative means, but of course be respectful and obeying of the law, which I'm sure all my viewers are. So this video is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. You can call another lawyer or myself. My phone number and website are listed below. If there's any show topics you'd like to see us cover, please send an email to the email address listed below, or leave a comment in the comment section. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.